In the first shots video for the PDP Match Steel Frame, we learned that Walther took feedback and built a better gun. But does that higher asking price reflect in the ownership? And in this video, we put 1,000 rounds through this gun to see how it holds up. Welcome back. If you had an opportunity to watch the first shots video on this gun, we did more of a comparison between that and its predecessor, the Walther Q5 steel frame. And we took a deep dive on looking at some of the finer details that Walther puts into this gun. So now we're gonna kind of see what the ownership of this gun is like when we do the longer round counts here. In the prior video, I talked briefly about how the Optic sat on this gun and what it meant for the shooting experience. But what I didn't say is how you get it. And when you buy a Walther, you end up being able to get one optic plate of your choice from the variety they have. And so all you end up having to do is just go to the website, fill out a quick form, and they'll send it to you about within a week or so. So one of the things I appreciate about this platform, especially being a competition shooter, is the ease of maintenance and if you have to tear this gun apart. Again, YouTube manual reviewer, I'm not modifying the gun, I'm just showing what this gun looks like, okay? That's one thing I've always loved about this platform is how easy it is to maintain. So just showing you kind of inside here with the slide, there's just not much in the way of debris. You know, one thing is the tighter the tolerances you have on a gun, the better it actually keeps at keeping all the gas and debris within this area up in here and not getting in the rest of the gun. But it is inevitable that it's just gonna get dirty, but compared to other guns I've torn apart at 1,000 rounds, this one is pretty good. As you can see, it's well oiled. You know, that's really the only thing you kind of think about on these guns is just keeping them oiled. It's interesting because the factory shooter for Walther, Hwansik Kim, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, he did an article on the Q5 Match a long time ago and put 10,000 rounds through the gun without cleaning it. He recently did that with the polymer PDP. And although I'm not suggesting that you should do that, it shows that how well these guns are built just beyond the capacity of not only competition, but how it's even practical for most people that don't like to clean their guns. So that's what the top side looks like. And if we're looking at here closely, okay, there's just a little bit of debris in here and I expect that. But everything is, you see more oil than you do debris itself. You know, you got a lot of brass shavings in there from ammo. That's all things to be expected, but the thing that you'll always love about this gun is it's just such an easy gun to take care of. You know, that's it. This is all you have to do to take this gun apart. And that's it, guys. Just make sure it's oiled. And yes, I'm going to recommend that you, of course, clean it, but this is a gun that you can just continue to go on, and this is probably one of the best parts of owning this gun is just, it's not a headache to own. By the way, if you have additional questions or even you have experience owning this gun or even the Walther Q5 Match Steel Frame, leave those comments below. I will respond to them fairly quickly, so just sound off in the comments of what's going on. Now, before we dive into the shooting experience, I want to ask if you like this video, hit that like button as that helps me a lot. And to help support the channel, the way I end up doing that is funding that through either developing corporate videos or I have classes that I hold in Dallas-Fort Worth if you're interested in performance shooting. If any of those don't interest, hitting that subscribe button definitely goes a long way to helping me. So diving into the shooting experience, there are a couple follow-up items I kind of wanted to review because I know there are things sometimes that you get from the factory initially, and as you break it in, it starts to actually sell better. Well, one of those items I kind of pointed out in the previous video was the creep in the trigger. And as we've put more rounds through it, I can tell you today, there's no creep in the trigger. I did put my trigger pull gauge one more time on this and it does still pull at 4.5 pounds. Now what experience has told me with the Q5 is that after around 2,000–3,000 rounds or so, it'll probably drop anywhere from another quarter to half a pound. So the beautiful thing is you only have good things to look forward to rather than trying to chase expectations like you would with some gun manufacturers out there on these supposed break-ins. And another thing I'll touch on is actually the recoil spring. As I mentioned before, they're heavily sprung, and one of you in the prior video was kind enough to leave the pull weight, which is around 19 pounds, which is heavy. Now, one thing I always did with my Q5s when I would run them for competition is I would take them to the range and break in recoil springs to about 500 rounds. That's when they set in well and the impulse actually improves. It was the same case with this gun as well. When gun manufacturers take good feedback and improve on something that's good, it translates somewhere. Particularly with the PDP, it translated in the actual shooting experience. Now, this platform was already known for being accurate, but how easy it is to be accurate at speed is the distinguishing factor I will say that this model carries over the polymer models or even the Q5 Match. As I kept shooting stages with this gun, it was easy for me to get really tight groups throughout the matches. And you'll see that I shot this gun confidently, especially when I came across stages that had steel. I just wasn't necessarily worried about missing it just because I felt that comfortable with the gun. The accuracy is just a portion of the shooting experience. The transitions, maneuvering the gun, all made sense. That was due largely in the balance of the gun. The Q5 Match Steel Frame had more weight towards the front, and all that feedback ended up translating more into the hands. And I touched briefly on that in the first shots video, but when you'd see me run stages, transitions for me were just immediate. You know, the things that create good transitions are 1, balance, 2, great ergonomics, and 3, your confidence in managing the trigger. And all those factors, when you add them up, just made for an experience that you end up saying, oh, you know what? This price is starting to make more and more sense, because I will tell you, if you were to look at price and just look at the gun, it may kind of set you back, but it's really difficult to articulate that through paper without actually shooting the gun. That's when this gun wins your heart, in the shooting experience. And one thing I'll just touch on too is I ended up shooting a local PCSL match with this, and the following day a USPSA match. Now, why I mention that is because the stages were identical, and on the USPSA day I shot my Shadow 2, largely because I wanted to work on my classification. And that gave me a good benchmark to say one simple thing: I like this gun more. One thing I had to specifically do with my Shadow 2 that this gun created habits with me in is I actually had to slow down in order to improve my accuracy. Typically in the past, when I've reviewed guns and then shot my Shadow 2, I've actually been happy to hop back on the Shadow 2. This is one rare occurrence where I will say, man, I reviewed a gun, especially a factory stock gun, and it was better than my gun that I've been built up over the years and I have a lot of time on. That's saying something, guys. That's how I genuinely feel about this gun. The reloads are amazing with this gun. They are quick, precise, and I'll let the video show a couple of my reloads because they were fairly spicy, and that's because it just doesn't require as much effort to think about this. Now, there's one caveat though. With the factory setup of the magazines, it is difficult to get a speed reload in. And there were 2 instances, one where I just did a speed reload on stage where I just tried to slap it in and I didn't seat it well, and you'll see it here. And the other one was when we had an unloaded start, which I decided to load up to 20 rounds. And so it was at the brim. And when that timer went off, well, the red mist took over. And that's tough because the particular stage I ran ended up calling for me to have that many rounds. And you'll see as I get further up on the stage on this one, I went to slide lock right before I did my reload. And so one thing too, when I'm out there shooting, I also get a lot of questions about the gun itself, and I like to get feedback from people out there. I wish I videoed these 2 shooters I gave this gun to just to kind of put a few rounds through it, but both reactions were the same. Whoa, this thing is so soft. And I would agree with that this is the noticeable thing about the PDP steel frame, is that it is a very soft impulse gun, regardless of what ammo you ran in it, because I ran all 3 major specs of ammo, 115, 124, 147. And I want to start with the 115 because 115 is typically the most accessible ammo out there and the one that you'll probably end up doing a lot of plinking with. With this gun in this setup, it had no problem shooting it. It was reliable, and it was just a touch snappy on the return to zero for my preference. The other side of the spectrum is 147. Now, you don't have as much gas behind that going off a bigger projectile. And so the recoil impulse is the thing that you will notice. And through this gun and this setup, it is just ridiculous. That's the best way I can describe it. It feels so soft. The challenge I have with that for my preference is I do like a little bit more snap in my gun, and I found that 124 was the best compromise. This gun will perform regardless of what ammo you end up putting through it, and that's one thing you'll love about this gun. You just don't worry so much about it like you would with some of the higher end guns as you start to climb up in that price point. For the most part, this thing was incredibly reliable. There's one thing though that stuck, and I was able to repeat this problem. Anytime I decided to Barney load a mag, and for those that don't know what that is, that's when you insert one mag, chamber around, and then you put a full mag in and seat it. So in this case, you'll have 20 in the mag and 1 in the gun for 21. The challenge with that is occasionally when I would do that, it would knock the gun out of battery. So when I'd go to shoot it, I would literally hear the click from the striker, but no bang. And that concerned me at first because I thought I had a gun that would fire out of battery, which if you're not familiar with that is a very bad thing. So what ended up happening though is when I looked at those rounds, the back end of them were really flat, meaning that there was no contact with the primers. What I ended up finding the remedy is when I knew I was going to Barney it, I would always end up checking the back side of it, and it would bump out just a little out of battery, and a good tap on the back put this thing in battery, and it was good to go. But guys, I want to say this, like, if that's something you have to pay attention to, that's something Walther may have to need to answer of why that may need to be happening. So do pay attention to that if you do that with this gun. Reverting back to some of my questions with the concerns on the competition side, for IDPA, the weight didn't change much as I expected, and the weight bumped up a little bit due to probably some of the debris and oil that I put in this gun. And so guys, the thing is, there's not enough room for error in that particular scale, because you can go to one competition, this thing could say it's heavy, and your day is pretty much done, or you get a DNF. You don't want that. If you could tell, there was one thing that I kind of hung up on a little bit on were just the magazines that came with them. You have some aftermarket options out there, and that would probably be the first investment I would make in this. If you're running production or stock service pistol with IDPA, I wouldn't worry about that as much as changing base pads. But if you're running USPSA's carry optic or limited optics division, you're gonna wanna take a look at some aftermarket setups. Now, I can't really put them here on YouTube, so I do have a link that kind of just reviews some recommendations I may have for that, and I'll leave the link below. So who is this gun for? Well, if you've already owned the Q5 Match Steel Frame, this gun is going to feel a little better in every way. The gun's ergonomics, the balance, the whole package really will create a more confident shooter. And if you had experience with that and put time on that platform, you will love this gun. And if you're an enthusiast, you'll just never have a boring moment owning this gun. You won't have to worry about maintenance as much as you climb in the higher echelon of prices with these type of guns. The maintenance is so easy on this because that will not be the biggest thing on your mind so much as how fast can I get to the range to put more rounds through this. So with that said, guys, that's all I have for you today, and we will see you at the range.